Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Organizing with HFT. I am your host today, Imani, and today we are interviewing Mr. Richard Shaw. Welcome, Mr. Richard. We're so glad to have you.
Good to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, to start off, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself in general?
Well, I am presently retired. I have a wife of now almost 40 years, Ellen Stupak Shaw, who was very active in HFT. I've got three children. Two of them live here, one in Pittsburgh. I began teaching back in 1969, and I was assigned to Edison Junior High back then and taught English and career orientation. I then was president of the Houston Federation of Teachers for 7 years. And then I went on to work for AFSCME and represented school district employees along with city and county employees. And then eventually I was elected as secretary treasurer of the Harris County AFL-CIO. And I retired. I retired in 2017 from that position that I held for 22 years. And then neatest thing about the last couple of years is that we celebrated 50 years of HFT.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been doing.
Right. So I'm hearing you're a union man. Love
all
it.
the way, I tell you.
All the way to the bones. Okay. So my question for you is, what led up to you starting the Houston Federation of Teachers?
Well, I had gotten this question in advance, and I've been living in my mind in the 70s now for the last 4 days thinking about that. As I said, I was a teacher in HISD, and I was in the middle school. And somewhere probably in the year of 1972, I was contacted by some other teachers who were looking at starting a union and wanted to talk about it. So we met, we started talking. I had been a member of then the Houston Teachers Association, and I was active in the school as well. And I was also active in, I think we started the first faculty advisory committee, which later became board policy, but we started the first one.
Yeah.
And that's where I had to convince the principal that we were there just to give him advice. We weren't going to tell him what to do, but we tried to tell him what to do also.
Right.
And so a group of us got together, what I call the secret meeting. There were 4 of us in that room. We were in John Cheeseman's house. And John Cheeseman became the first president of the union for a year. And we decided to start a union. We weren't quite sure with whom we were going to affiliate, but the AFT had reached out to us, and we didn't know much about the AFT. We knew that they were in all the big cities, very active. We were a bunch of frustrated, mostly middle school teachers. We wanted a union. We wanted something, an organization that bargained collectively. And at the time in HISD, the largest teacher group was the Houston Teachers Association, and they were part of TSTA and NEA. And they were opposed to bargaining.
Right.
And what? What do you mean opposed to bargaining? And then at the other organization in HISD at the time was the Congress of Houston Teachers. And they were an organization that was opposed to having teachers have an association. That's what they existed for. They were against unions. They were against the HTA. They believed that teachers didn't really need associations, even though they themselves were an association. So we knew we needed a union. And if I can give you kind of a picture of HISD back in 69, 70, 71, from about 5,000 feet up, it looked about the way it did. Some 250 schools and everything kind of together. But on the ground, HISD was very different. One, HISD was a segregated school district. That means the faculties were segregated along with the children. And HISD was under a court order to integrate, as many school districts were. If you remember, with All Due Speed, 1954, Brown versus the board.
Right.
Well, back in 1969 or so, it finally, All Due Speed caught up with HISD. And at that time they had a segregated district. In other words, there were schools that were called black schools because most of the kids going there were black, and all
Right.
the faculty was black. And then there were white schools. All the kids are white, and then the faculty was all white. And then there were schools that were Hispanic, but they counted Hispanics as white. Well,
Mm.
that was HISD on the ground, so they had to go through a desegregation, which meant that not only did they have to start pairing up schools for desegregation, they mostly paired up the black schools and the Hispanic schools, but they also
Mhm.
had to move massive numbers of faculty out of those schools. So in the
Right.
case of the black teachers who'd been teaching in their segregated district for many years, if you know anything about Jim Crow,
Mhm.
forced to move, and they took about 1/3 of them out of every school and moved them to a white school. And so we
Wow.
had that going on. The other thing that HISD kind of looked like then was that we had inner city schools and we had outer city schools, and you can guess which schools had resources and which ones didn't.
For sure.
We had schools that that were using old textbooks with schools using new textbooks. We had all that going on in the school district. If you were in a black school, you were most likely in a very old building. It was run down,
Mhm.
high class sizes, no resources at all, no supply room. There was nothing for you.
Right.
You had to buy everything. And my wife, Ellen, who started teaching in 73, literally found that out as a kindergarten teacher. She walked into a classroom and there was nothing there. So if you wanted,
What?
you had to buy it. They did supply some bulletin board paper for you, but the rest.
Wow.
So HISD was undergoing a lot of issues. You can imagine what's going to happen when you take a black teachers and move them into a previously all white school with faculty.
Right.
You were taking white teachers and moving them into previously all black schools. You can imagine just what was going on. You know,
Right. A
at
lot
this
of tension,
a
probably.
lot of tension, a lot of bad principles, a lot
Mhm.
of harassment, a lot of intimidation. I had a principal, for example, that motivated me. He used to get up and yell at us in faculty meetings. And I'm sitting there going, buddy, I'm on your side. I need, I need a few things in my classroom. I don't need you to yell at me. And so that's what was going on. And we knew we needed a union. We needed something that we could call a union uh,
Right.
because that was the only thing that was going to impact the district. And frankly, teachers were harassed and intimidated. They were scared. So when we chartered the union on May 1st of 1973 at the La Quinta over there off Southwest Freeway, it's still there.
What?
We chartered the union with 48 people, adopted the Constitution, and we had ourselves a union. We
Wow.
had 48 people. We didn't have an office. We used the trunks of our cars. We eventually rented a small office. First thing you buy as a union back then was a mimeograph machine because we
I'm
had to
sorry.
make
What?
a mimeograph machine.
Oh.
We had to make flyers,
Okay, okay, okay.
and you didn't have Xerox machines back then, at least that were
Mhm.
available to people to a union like we had with nothing, no money.
Right.
You had to make flyers. So we began representing our members. We developed a form actually called the Member Service Request Form, and we actively encouraged our members to file grievances. We
Mhm.
actively appeared before the school board, constantly talking to the school board about issues. We did surveys. I still remember the first time I left my school after school because I was teaching all day to go over and represent a teacher in a grievance. And I still remember that principal's reaction. And I had to finally tell him in the grievance because he kept trying to talk to the teacher. I said, "Sir, you will look at me and we will have that conversation. I'm representing this teacher."
Right.
And that took that kind of an attitude on their part. It it took some doing for us to get there. You got to build a union. You got to find stewards. And
Right.
back in that day, we called them union stewards. We didn't call them building reps.
Mm-hmm.
They were stewards. And if you know anything about union stewards, they have an obligation to their members. Usually in traditional
Right.
unions, they interpret the contract on site. But in
Right.
our case, they represented the member. And we had a lot of training
Mm-hmm.
trying to convince our stewards that, yeah, you can go in and talk to your principal, put on your steward hat, tell your
Right.
principal you're the union steward. You're no longer Miss Smith, teacher. You're the union steward. And you have a few things you want to discuss.
Right.
As we as teachers already know that when we interact with children, we establish our authority in the classroom.
Right.
We let everyone know that we're in charge. And then we're going to start having conversations after that once we understand all the ground rules.
Right. But I love that. I love the power that you were putting back into
Yeah.
the members of you are able to do this. Put on your steward hat, like you said, and now it's time to talk business with your principal.
And the key was back in those days was getting stewards and then addressing issues. And back in those days, I was a teacher. I was elected in 1975 as president of the union.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed in the classroom for a year because we didn't have enough money to actually make anybody full time. Eventually, I took a leave the next year and became president. The district offered a leave for the teacher association president. I said, "Hey, we're the teacher union. We get a leave too." And
Right.
so I took that leave and came out of the classroom knowing that I was probably never going to go back because one, they wouldn't want me back.
Right.
And so that's what we did. We had a lot of support from the AFT in those years. They used to send us teachers from New York and Chicago, and they would go into the schools and organize. And those teachers would have to explain the HISD teachers what a union contract was.
Mm-hmm.
If you just talk about collective bargaining, that doesn't mean anything to anybody.
Right. Yeah, not in Texas.
We have a contract. So what we did in those days, and we're still doing it now, we use policy and procedure as our union contract, and we use grievances to enforce it. And we use different things to enforce things. For example, HFT right now has a lawsuit against Miles holding on to that raise money. Well,
right.
we took the district to court over a couple things back in those early days.
Mm-hmm.
In one case, teachers were required to pay for lost student textbooks. You heard what I said.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
The student lost a textbook and the student couldn't pay for it. They made the teacher pay for it. And it was practice. And at the end of the year, the principal would literally hold your paycheck. There was no direct deposit then. They held your paycheck until you wrote the check out for those books.
What?
And we said, no more.
Right.
And so it was the year of 1975, the end of that year, when we said, we're going to sue the first principal that tries it. So I went to that lounge. I went to the lounge after school and sat there on the lounge phone, which was kind of our union phone.
Mm-hmm.
And got that call, and we took that principal into court. And we won it, and they ended that practice. We had inside the courtroom, they had to hand that teacher her paycheck because they withheld her, her pay. So we had another case where a principal was threatening people if they joined the union, and we took him to the Texas Education Agency.
Mm-hmm.
To my knowledge, no one had ever done that before. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the TEA is not really there for us, you know that, but
right, yeah,
clearly we made it there for us. So. And we said, oh, hell no. And there was a policy behind it. So there was that. Probably the biggest issue was the whole concept of due process.
Right.
In other words, did you afford that member due process? Do you have cause? Do you have proof? Did you tell that teacher what she or he had to do to improve? Since you came in and didn't like something they were doing, did you tell them anything? Did you give them time? We had to also convince our members that because they were public sector workers, they were entitled to due process. So that was another whole learning thing we had to do. Yeah, you have a right to due process, and you have a right to demand it, but you're going to have to demand it. The union's going to be sitting next to you.
Right.
You also have to want it. So that was what the early days were about. We had to figure out ways to deal with grievances both individually, at the area level and at the school district level, at the court level. We had a major case where we had a teacher who was fired. The one who they tried to make her pay for textbooks.
Yes.
They fired her, and we took her case to the school board and won.
Yes.
And because there was really no due process, which we proved, we had a great attorney. His name was Larry Watts. And we won that case. And that was a major, major win because it established due process. It established that teachers had to have some kind of a growth plan. Tell me what you want me to do.
Exactly.
And so we had to establish all that back in those days, even though it was kind of in the rules. If you were a teacher in a school being intimidated, it wasn't unheard of for a principal just to say, "You're fired, get out of here." We had to tell our members, they can't do that to you. You go back to school the next day.
Right.
They can't do that. They have to fire you, legally and so forth. So that's what, and what we tried to do. Yes, we tried to teach our members to will power, and that was really important. But we were also very aggressive.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
I like to think of us as impatient. I was a pretty young guy back then. I was like 27, 28, and 29 when I came out of the classroom finally. And we were as a group pretty impatient. We were that Vietnam,
right?
and having been a teacher, I didn't like harassment. I didn't like people that were made to feel bad or harassed, intimidated. We didn't like that. And we made it pretty clear we didn't like it. Back in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of harassment going on, especially toward women teachers. And back then they didn't have laws about it. We called it harassment. And a lot of women had to put up with that on the job. Imagine that. They still do. And we used to have we had a couple publications that teachers loved. One, we had our regular newsletter. Back in those days, you had a newsletter. That's what we used the mimeograph for. Then we had another publication called the HFT, the Teacher Advocate. And then my buddy with whom I shared office space, because he later came out of the classroom, was Michael Reese. And Michael is gone now. But Michael Reese was so important to this union. And I kind of like to think of Michael as we were kind of the Lennon McCartney of the time. We paired up. I don't know which of us was Lennon or McCartney further, but Michael had a steel trap with a mind. Did a lot of the grievances.
Yeah.
A lot of the rule setting for principals to follow. Because our philosophy was, if I have to come back to your school the second time for the same thing,
right,
I'm not coming back to your school. I'm going somewhere else. It's going to be the school board,
right?
Be an area office. We used to have something we printed monthly called the district atrocity, and we would have the atrocity of the month. And then we named names. We used to do surveys. We did a lot of surveys. We named names in schools. They found out the principal did this, principal did that, all based on facts.
Yes.
But we kind of call that our tattletale strategy. You know how teachers hate tattletales, but sometimes you got to be a tattletale.
Right.
And so we and I'm not saying that we won everything we won, but what I wanted
Mhm.
people to know, if they got into a fight with us, we were both going to come out a little bruised, figuratively speaking. No one,
Right.
no one got hurt here, okay? But there was going to be a fight there because we were going to have certain standards that were going to be at that.
Right.
And so those were kind of the early days of what we were doing and all the things accompanying that. The whole desegregation thing was very, very frightening for a lot of teachers, especially
Mhm.
Black members that went into the white schools. It wasn't uncommon to hear the N word and all that
Mhm.
going on, and that was a tough time. That was a tough time, especially to talk to one of those teachers that were in that situation and say, "Hey, we have a union now, but you know."
Right, right. I'm really glad you painted that background for me though, because I would imagine y'all are starting HFT and y'all are like the go-getters. Y'all are really like attacking and it's good. Y'all are fighting for your members. Were people more scared of you guys and like scared of joining? Like, how would you get people to join? Or were they just like, oh, yeah, like they're going to represent me. I need to join HFT today.
Well, here's how it worked mostly. We started with 48. Under my tenure, by the time I left in 82, we had just gone over 1,000 members.
Ooh.
So, and then shortly after I left, Dale Fallon became president. That's when it really took off in terms of size. But no, it wasn't easy. One,
Mm-hmm.
people were scared,
Mm-hmm.
but we purposely carved ourselves a union, and we became known as the union. And still today, it's the union. And a lot of times, just like today, we used to get calls. I'm not a member, but
Right.
and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, we did promise our members legal representation, and we did, and we figured out a way to pay for it because we were also at the same time starting the Texas AFT.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us involved in starting HFT were also starting Texas AFT,
Mm-hmm.
and they were organizing all over the state of Texas. And so we were at the same time doing all that together, kind of trying to figure out a way to represent members, trying to provide legal representation. And legal representation was a lot, but we knew we had to represent our members in that very forceful way, legal way, because if we won, they weren't going to mess with us again. It was scary for people, but we had a strong group of really strong people, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about a wide variety of people: young people, older teachers, white teachers, black teachers, brown teachers, and we were the union. Just the other day, my wife and I were volunteering at stages as ushers, and a lady came in who's a member of the union, and she screamed out HFT, and that's the whole purpose of being in a union. So we
Right.
we use that as much to our advantage as possible, and we're still all in the union.
How do you feel about everything that is happening within HISD today?
To say I'm concerned is an understatement.
Mhm.
I believe that Miles has an agenda, and it's to get rid of public education.
Mhm.
It's to turn this district over to charters.
Right.
Some of it is just flat anti-union. We're in the state of Texas here, guys.
Right.
They don't like us, and they don't like our mothers,
Mhm.
and they're going to do anything they can. So, it's horrible. In fact, I think of Jackie and the others very often because I know what I was going through. We had our threats, and we had a number of things going on, but nothing like where they were attempting to actually dissolve the
Right.
district. The closest thing
Right.
we ever got is they tried to break away part of HISD on the west side of town.
Mhm.
They actually had a vote. They were going to break it away. And of course, the school on the west side of town that was going to lead that charge was Robert E. Lee High School.
Oh god.
What does that tell you?
Right. Such a fitting name.
They didn't name any schools Ulysses Grant
Right.
or Appomattox. So that's about as close as we got. to the dissolution of a district, because what they were trying to do is they're trying to get away from having black kids in their classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just being real straight here, folks. That they did not want black students. They didn't want to see them. They didn't want them in their school district. You'd never believe this, but it was the 1955 legislature that set the boundary for HISD. The 1955 legislature. And what
Mm-hmm.
did we have happen in 54? Brown versus the board.
Mm-hmm.
So it was nasty. I mean, it was nasty, nasty, and it's probably still nasty.
Right.
But it was different from what's going on today. And I know the HF's doing everything legally they can do. I do
Right.
know this though: you still have a union, and the most important part of that union is actually in the workplace. It's how
Mm-hmm.
teachers relate to that principal. You may not be able to fix miles, at least not today,
Right.
but you still have teachers in a building with a principal. And if that principal wants to get anything done, those teachers are going to have to cooperate.
Mm-hmm.
And they can
Right.
cooperate aggressively or passively.
Right. So I organized kind of like the west southwest side of the district, and well, really just across the district. It's a lot of fear. It's a lot of fear to join. It's a lot of fear to speak out or to do anything, to file a grievance. So I'm asking you, what would you tell to educators on why they should still join the union or our union? Why should they still join, even though they have that fear, even though they are afraid to step forward? What's your advice for them?
Well, it's easy for me to say you need to overcome that fear.
Right.
But what I'd rather say to them is that you need to overcome that fear. You know that's what you need to do. But are we gonna remain figuratively in chains?
Right.
Am I gonna live my life in fear?
Right.
There is still some. There's still a little bit of due process left, and that principal still needs you to do certain things because that principal still can't do it all.
Right.
And we have some friends, by the way, outside your school. We've got some friends in the AFL-CIO. We've got some community friends. We have to teach people about power, and I suspect you're encountering a lot of younger teachers
Mm-hmm.
that didn't study unions, didn't study
Right.
dynamics, didn't that like many of us were. I was happy being a teacher. I still look back on those 7 years as a wonderful time in my life. I was happy there. I was
Right.
happy with my kids. I wasn't happy with the principal. I wasn't happy with the system, but I was happy with my kids. And
Right.
and 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 we have to somehow convince teachers that you need to help us make the investment in this profession here. There's some things we fixed, and there's some things we haven't fixed yet.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that fix is going to have to be you. I'm never, one time I remember my wife Ellen, her principal came to her and said, I'm thinking of having everyone come in on Saturday for an in service. And would you go ask Gail Fallon what she thinks of that?
Uh,
And my wife Ellen calls up Gail. Gail says, "You tell your principal that I'm going to make an example out of him
oh,
to do that." So sometimes we have to put on a teacher hat too to deal with administration and principals. They don't know any more than the rest of us. They're winging it too, especially today.
mm-hmm.
But they don't last
Mm-hmm.
but a year or two. Miles has
Mm-hmm.
them, and years ago the principals used to have their own union,
Right.
and one year they gave up their contracts for a pay raise, and now they have no more contracts.
Mm.
And for years I tried to get the principals to start a union, but you talk about a group of sheep.
Oh my God.
And I gave up.
Mm-hmm. with everything going on with the takeover, what type of encouragement can you give to the educators in HISD right now as the founder of HFT?
Um, Tough times. We're in tough times right now. These times will not last forever. I think at some point that's gonna be lifted. I don't know what we're gonna be end up with. Hang in there and survive. I mean, there are Fort Worth is fixing to go through it right now. We know that.
Yeah.
I have the feeling that the Fort Worth AFT is going to be sitting down with the HFAFT,
Mhm.
and there's going to be some trading of strategies. And Jackie's going to say we did this and this and this, and this worked and this didn't.
Right.
It's going to be rough. Um, there, we still have a union. We still have solidarity. Um, we we still have the ability to influence that principle,
Right.
and we have the ability to change some things still, and at least hold on to a few things we have. But it's not going to be easy, and that's what I would tell them, that we're resourceful. We can figure out maybe another approach. You do that with your kids all the time.
Right. Now you just got to do it with yourself
Yeah.
and with your coworkers, right?
And as a union, we spend a lot of time counseling people, with their jobs. Look at it that way. These folks have to realize they're not alone anymore if they've got the union.
Right.
The thing about unions, they're beautiful organizations. They always speak the truth. And we always did that in the early days, and Jackie does it now. They say the truth. You're in the school, you're speaking the truth, and you don't sugarcoat it. It's just the truth. And
Right.
and and we're still fighting. When we just elected two new school board members, that
Mhm.
when they get on school board, they're going to be our friends. I can remember the days where
Right.
we had no friends on the school board. So
Right. Progress. You got to find the hope where it is.
yeah, you do. And I remember one time there were a couple schools where they would say, whatever you do, don't send Gail Fallon out here until you've given me a chance to solve the problem. Gail was feared. They did not like Gail Fallon walking into their school, because they knew that next minute she was going to be on the phone with some school board member about that school. And that's the way
Right.
it still kind of is. And
Right.
y'all are still doing teacher surveys, and
Mhm.
they used to accuse us of making up those surveys, but we
Oh
did.
my gosh.
The answers were real, and we published the answers.
Right. Yeah. We just finished the survey, I believe, last week. Yep.
There you go, and you're going to tell the members what the answers were.
Mhm.
And the smart principles are, how can I get a copy of the survey on my school first?
That's that's a whole different conversation. I don't understand why administration doesn't use us as a resource. Like, where we can give you the answers, but you just want to fight us and see us as the enemy, like for no reason.
Well, it always astounded me after I got involved with other unions, that how badly ISDs screw it up. I'm picking my words carefully. I'm not going to get real union on you here. Here they have a group of people that voluntarily come and and take on probably the worst situation you could, which is to have 35 kids in a classroom, all moving
Right.
around at the same time. And you're going to teach them basically on where they start when they enter your classroom. And you're going to figure all that out. And you come every day, and you even save up sick leaves, because you don't want to get sick, because you don't want to miss a day with the kids. They have all these willing people, and they screw that up.
Mhm.
The average work site out there, They're not
Right.
always happy with their work,
Right.
Usually teachers are bounding out of bed and they're there every day and they're bright-eyed
Right. Early.
and the district manages to take motivated people and screw over them.
Yeah. I don't know how they do that. It's horrible to see. It's horrible to
When
see.
all they really have to do is say, Imani, what do you need? Is there something I can get you today? You need some more border paper for your bulletin board.
Right.
Uh,
It's simpler than they're making it, for sure.
what do you need? Can I come in a minute in the afternoon? Maybe let you go to the bathroom.
Right. Right.
Take my wife, Ellen, taught 39 years in the district. It's just one UTI infection after another because of bathroom issues that elementary teachers have.
Wow.
Think about that. And the same problems on assembly lines and everywhere else where people just can't go to the bathroom.
Right.
It's very, very common. What can a principal do? Give the teacher a 15-minute break to go to the bathroom.
Right.
And see how, there's all kinds of things they could do to improve morale.
Mm-hmm.
And to make life a little easier.
Right. Right.
Can you imagine what would happen at HISD if a principal walked in and said, Miss Smith, I'm going to let you run down the hall. Why don't you take a 10-minute break? And I'll just watch your class a minute.
Right.
What would happen in that world?
The fact that it has to be an imaginary world and it's not just reality. Huh.
Yes.
Which is crazy because I even remember when I was a kid, like principals would do that. And that's when the class is like perfect. We're just okay, we're just doing the work. The principal is watching us for like the next 10 minutes. So none of the kids act up. So it's I guess it's the lost part.
You really got a good classroom here. You don't have any problems here.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Richard, for talking with me. This was a great interview. I do have one last quick question for you. It's just, what was it like seeing HFT turn 50 years old? I'm sure that felt amazing.
Well, I was telling my wife, Ellen, we were talking. I was the one who designed this logo.
What?
And I took the AFT logo and it's holding a shield. You notice that? So I whited out AFT and did rub-on letters and made HFT, but they were fatter. They were fatter letters. They changed the font on these letters. But that's okay. I was kind of stunned that it had been 50 years. I've been amazed. All the HFT presidents, we've only had 5 presidents in 50 years, with Gail being the longest serving one. And we're an amazing organization. We're an amazing union. And they all know us as HFT. That's what's
right.
Or the union.
Right.
The HFT union's here.
Right. Right.
And I think we accomplished what we wanted to initially. Maybe it's going to make us stronger for what we're going through now. But we really didn't think this thing was going to go 50 years because we thought we'd all be fired too.
Well, I'm glad y'all did it. I'm glad y'all fought for us. And here it is. Your legacy is still here, even in the logo.
I love it.
Awesome.
I love it. And you notice when AFT changed their logo, we didn't change ours.
Right.
I often call it the Sissy logo, the other AFT logo.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today, Mr. Richard. It's been great talking to you. So that does wrap up our episode of Organizing with HFT. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And then to all our viewers, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to make sure you see our next episode. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.